All right. Hey, David. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, doing fine. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
You are an EMT in Philadelphia, yeah?
Yes, sir. In a great city of brotherly love.
Well, I bet you've seen some stuff, huh?
More than I would like to, yes.
I guess my first question right off the bat is how much of what you're seeing in your daily routine now is COVID related and how much is just, car accidents, God forbid, shootings, stuff like that. But how much of your day is now COVID related?
Yeah, so obviously the day-to-day stuff hasn't changed much. You still have your shootings, your stabbings, your overdoses, so be it. But now with coronavirus and COVID related, you're seeing about your day is typically half and half, whether someone actually has the virus or someone's just very afraid and they have one of the symptoms and they just want someone to talk to. And, for us to play a little bit of therapist with them to help them get through it. So I would say about half the calls are COVID related every day for the past, 8, 9 months, however long it's been.
I mean, we as a society have been bombarded with COVID for the last year. But to be honest with you, I don't really know what symptoms would be. I mean, I suspect it's flu-like. If people think they have fever or there's shortness of breath or something, they're going to immediately think now that they have COVID when in fact it might not be, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem, especially with cold and flu season. That brings its own issues to begin with. But now, as you said, COVID kind of mimics a lot of those symptoms, whether it be a cough, congestion, uh, just sore throat, and so on and so forth. But then you also have additional symptoms, like believe it or not, pink eye is actually a minor symptom that you can have, or pain in the side, and obviously loss of smell and taste. So that's the hardest thing about COVID. You never really know if you're dealing with it or not because there's a countless amount of symptoms that go along with it at this point.
How long have you been an EMT?
So I've been coming up on 2.5 years now. I graduated from the University of South Carolina and pursued EMT to start my career in the medical field.
Yeah, okay. What you said medical field career. What is it leading to? Where do you go from EMT?
So EMT, I'm hoping to go to become a physician assistant in emergency medicine, in particular pediatrics. Hoping to work in the emergency room one day to help out children. So this is a good position to get my feet wet and really get into it.
Does this count as sort of internship?
Yes and no.
Yes and
For
no.
schools, yes, for schools you need a certain amount of hours to apply to begin with. But obviously this is a job that we are there for people when they need us.
Well, I think certainly the on-the-job experience this would be invaluable.
Yes, yeah, and my job in particular, since I'm contracted with the National Emergency Response Team with FEMA, so I've been witnessing quite a bit as of late.
I bet. Have you been vaccinated for COVID yet?
I have, yep, I got Moderna one, and I got my second dose about a week ago, so
Great.
I'm fully vaccinated.
No symptoms? No side effects?
Nope, the first one, just a little pain in the arm, and the second one, a little bit of pain in the arm, and for about 24 hours after, I had slight body acheness, chills, but then the next morning bounced back
So,
perfectly fine.
so good night's sleep and you were ready to go again, yeah?
Exactly. Yep.
Well, that's good. That's encouraging because I haven't been vaccinated and I don't know of too many people, but one guy I know who was considerably older than you, he was I think 71, and he couldn't move his right arm for 2 days. It just sort of paralyzed his arm.
Oh yeah, yeah. My mom who had it, she couldn't raise her arm above her shoulder for about 2 days. So it's definitely a little bit of pain. But then I'm also working on a COVID vaccination site in Camden, New Jersey. We're a super site, so we're doing about 2,000 vaccines a day. So as far as the initial reactions go, I'm on standby in case someone needs, an EpiPen or aspirin or anything to kind of help them with any reactions they may face. But we've done about 20,000 vaccines so far, and of those 20,000, I've seen maybe one or two with a slightly itchy throat. A little bit of Benadryl cured it, and they were perfectly fine. So it's been going good so far.
Okay, that's actually what I was going to ask you next. Was it, had you seen any severe reactions to the vaccine? So no, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No. No. So far, it's going good. Just a lot of people with a little bit of anxiety, naturally, something new. But besides that, as far as the actual effects of it, nothing serious right now.
Well, good. I'm really happy to hear that because you're right that people are going to be hesitant to take it. And quite honestly, I'm a little bit kind of like, well, let me wait and see how it goes before I go jump in and get it done because obviously you want to see. But where people are reporting very, very few side effects, that's very encouraging. And it's also encouraging because it gives us a kind of a hope of a timeline when this damn thing is going to be gone and we can get back to our lives, you know, because it's certainly screwed everybody up, I'm sure.
I can't wait for normalcy.
Yeah, I mean, just to go out, to go to dinner, to go to a concert. I mean,
Oh yeah, listen, I'm counting down the minutes.
so what made you decide to be an EMT? What was there any particular motivation?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of one of those things throughout my whole life. I've kind of always been the type of person that wanted to be there for someone. If they're facing a tough time physically or mentally, I wanted to be there to help them. And so I figured being a first responder, in particular an EMT in the emergency medical service, is a great way to help someone at their lowest moments. And, you know, when they're hurting, like I said, whether it's emotionally or physically, you are the first person they see as that beacon of hope to kind of get them through their lowest moments. And I've always wanted to be there for someone in the wake of tragedy to help them.
Well, you know, that's very admirable. And I think we need more people on this earth who express that because when you look at the news and what's going on in the world, you don't get this impression that man has this innate desire to help his fellow man. And you certainly don't hear people saying it that much. If they do say it, it's usually coming from politicians who you know damn well don't mean it. So, you know,
Yeah,
when I hear it from you, it's very sincere and I believe it and it makes me feel good that there are people like you out there. So thank you for that. I appreciate that.
thank you. Really appreciate it.
So you've got a book out called Behind the Mask, Untold Stories of EMS in a Pandemic. I don't even have to ask what the motivation was to write the book. So why don't you just, do you have any anecdotes or anything you want to share from the book?
Well, so the book in general, it's the whole story. It follows my journey through the pandemic from before the outbreak to where we are now, and it shares the unfiltered, horrific stories that you don't really see on the news or social media. That kind of gives the reader a firsthand perspective of what it's like to be an emergency medical technician or a medic during these times, and the emotional and physical struggles that it's been throughout this past year, to kind of gain a deeper appreciation for what we've been going through. So, for a couple examples, it shows how, you know, like you said earlier, on top of COVID, we've also dealt with first experience of drive-by shootings and massive apartment complex fires and suicides in all its forms. And so the story kind of goes into depth about those things without violating any HIPAA rights, obviously. But then it also goes into the effects that it's been taking on us personally, whether it be sleeping in our cars for weeks on end because we were too afraid to transmit whatever we picked up to give to our relatives, you know, back home, or working 16, 12, 24 hours every single day with not a single day off for 40, 50, 60 days straight. So it's been exhausting, to say the least.
That was one thing I was going to ask you too. Before the vaccine was available, and you're out there in the front lines coming in contact with people, presumably, that were positive for COVID, how many times did you have to get tested?
FEMA, we were supposed to get tested after my first FEMA deployment in March. That fell through, so we were forced to do obviously a 14-day quarantine from our family, which just added on to the stress because we obviously couldn't be with our loved ones during these challenging times, especially in March when it felt like the world was ending around us and we
Yeah.
had no idea what we were dealing with. And then again in Texas after my FEMA deployment, then we had to do a 14-day quarantine because tests have been limited throughout these different spikes, and we felt that if we weren't showing immediate symptoms, we weren't qualified to get tested. So I have only officially been tested one time throughout the past 9 months.
This might sound like a stupid question, but are EMTs stationed at fire stations or at hospitals?
Well, we have our own stations, separate from fire. Some are conjoined, but most of the time we have our own stations that are spread out throughout cities or counties. And then obviously we can post up at the hospital if need be, but we always have a station to retreat to after we drop our patient off.
Okay, so you're kind of a separate entity from the fire department?
It depends. Like in New York City, FDNY, I don't want to say there's a feud, but they do not share a common. You either have an EMS station or a fire station. I think there's only one or two stations across all New York that actually shares the station between yourselves. And then you have other counties like Philadelphia, where Philly Fire shares both its stations with EMS and fire. So it just depends where you go.
It seems to me that they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, typically, if there is a fire, obviously you guys would be needed. If there's a car accident, you guys would be needed. It's very rare that you wouldn't be needed unless it's a abandoned building that's burning down, something like that, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. On scene, obviously, fire and EMS is going to put whatever differences you might want to say they have, obviously, to get the job done. But then afterwards, if someone orders a pizza, well, it depends who ordered that pizza. If a firefighter ordered it, EMS isn't getting it. Or if a medic ordered it, fire's not getting it. It's just there's like little back and forth jokes that they like to share.
So this is like Army Navy.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
is it kind of
Yes.
like that? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
Is there one particular call that distresses you more than others? In other words, if you get if that type of a call and you go, oh, that kind of unnerves you at all?
Well, I guess this is pretty obvious, but if you get that massive mass casualty incident where it's a multiple car pileup, or God forbid, a plane goes down or a building's on fire, you have no idea what you're heading to. I've been to a apartment complex fire that already had 7 casualties before we arrived. There were 3 more still trapped in the building, countless amount injured. And the emotion that you see of the screams, watching it like you're on a movie set, it's horrific. So you got the screams of people that are suffering and families that are just watching and just constantly running around, making sure you're okay, and prioritizing who needs to go to the hospital immediately and who we can treat on scene. So it's sometimes ranges from 10 minutes to hours on scene, just trying to sort everything out. So without saying, those are definitely the most stressful calls.
How do you disconnect yourself from that emotionally?
I actually talk about this in the book too. Unfortunately, EMS and first responders are kind of forced to develop a darker sense of humor. That if you're not in the medical field or in that first responder line of business, it kind of seems a little strange because it comes across very cold-hearted and like people. Like, you have to kind of make light and joke about what you're experiencing, in order to get through it. It's almost like how people may avoid naming a pet or naming an animal just so, like, if it passes on, you're not too emotionally attached to it. Because unfortunately, if you let yourself reflect and really dig into what you're witnessing and what you're going through, you're just going to get caught in this downhill spiral of emotion. And unfortunately, it's pretty hard to bounce back. I've seen a lot of good EMTs and medics that have gone through a lot of therapy from what they've been experiencing as of late.
Well, yeah, and I think that relates and applies to doctors, to police officers, firefighters, all of you guys, all of the
Sure.
frontline people, where you have to kind of you almost I hate to say you have to live in a fantasy. That's not what I mean. But that's the picture in my head I'm getting where the reality is so gruesome sometimes. That when you come home, you kind of have to have a little bit of a nice bubble to go back to. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is a difficult analogy, but do you get it? Do you know what I'm
No,
talking
I
about?
certainly
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
Especially during this time when I was in New York City, we were facing record high. We were citywide, we were facing about 300 cardiac arrests a day, with unfortunately nearly 70% of them dying. So it got to the point where it was so tragic and so heavy, but in order to not get caught up in it and being ready for the next call to come, around the station, crew would come back and be like, "Yep, another one," and then you just try to move on with the next call and be ready for whoever needs you next. So yeah, it's definitely that. I don't want to say, like you said, not a fantasy world, but definitely you try to kind of block out those dark moments.
Maybe alternate reality would be a better place,
Yes.
a better
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We do have to wrap this up. Unfortunately, our time is up. David, do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, so my books are available at my personal website at www.davidscochran.com. My books are also available directly on Amazon to purchase as a paperback or ebook.
Okay, you said books plural. Do you have more than one?
Yes, I actually have the first of my 5-book fictional series, Brothers at War, Corrupt Nation, which it's a fictional story about if all the states were to secede from the federal government to run under their own state law. So governors become presidents, state lines become country borders, and naturally economies are going to fail. You're going to have people that are anxious, and territorial battles will occur. So it's a fun little fictional thing I put together.
Oh, well, that does sound fun. 50 little
Yeah,
countries. Yeah, that would be interesting. We'd be a
exactly.
giant version of Europe, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, America would become a European style lifestyle overnight. And
Yeah.
kind of how would that happen? So,
Thanks so much for coming on, David. I enjoyed talking to you. Best of